Welcome to Marketplace Tech Bytes, our weekly review of a few of the big stories making headlines across the industry. I'm Stephanie Hughes. This week, tech stocks drop mid-tariff uncertainty. TSMC announces a $100 billion investment in U.S. chipmaking. And a Reddit co-founder joins a bid to acquire TikTok. I'm joined by our regular contributor, Natasha Mascarenhas, a reporter at The Information. Hey, Natasha.
Hello. Good to be here.
So we're going to start with our bite of the week. This is one number that provides some insight into what's going on in tech. Natasha, what is your number?
Yes, well, I'm excited to not be talking about layoffs for once. My bite of the week is 40,000, which is approximately how many construction jobs are expected to be created, regarding the news item you just mentioned around TSMC announcing a $100 billion investment in Arizona. So, I mean, let's count them, but seems exciting.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So we're going to talk more about that in a second. But first, let's talk about the stock market. So a number of tech companies saw their stock prices decline earlier this week when new tariffs on China, Mexico, and Canada were put in place. That volatility, it continued when President Trump announced yesterday that some of those tariffs would not be going into effect right away. Natasha, you follow a lot of startups that are not yet publicly traded, but still are raising money, raising funding. How are tariffs and a general lack of certainty affecting startup investment?
A startup can have as little as 2 months left in the bank or 16 months left in the bank. So If you are a early stage startup, you are thinking in terms of months, not years as much. And so to me, that really reads as worries that emerge around, are you going to be able to secure partnerships? Are you going to be able to raise funding? For many reasons, this being one of them, VCs have actually stayed away from consumer startups, hardware startups over the past several years. It's definitely not an in vogue category by any means. And so I think in that way, a lot of the startups I speak to are not, messaging me this week, freaking out. But I mean, if you're an early stage startup and you were thinking about launching, maybe you pivot, but maybe you just really rethink the strategy on how to secure partnerships with VCs and sort of, really talking more to the incumbents, because a scrappy early stage startup definitely does not have the kind of capital or maybe even ability to bring offshore operations to the United States immediately. There's some examples, but it's a challenge and it's an expensive one.
Yeah, for sure. So let's move to our next story. As you mentioned, so TSMC announces new $100 billion investment in U.S. chip making. So the Taiwan Semiconductor manufacturing company announced this week that it's investing an additional $100 billion to make chips for AI and other high-tech applications in the U.S. That's on top of an existing $65 billion investment. TSMC said this move is meant to support its customers, including Apple, NVIDIA, and Broadcom. Natasha, how do you read that statement?
For sure. I mean, this is really TSMC's bread and butter. A lot of its customers are NVIDIA, AMD, and they're also working within the Trump administration as we see a lot of chip making efforts go in-house, or rather in-country. Mm-hmm. And so to me, the investment obviously allows TSMC to begin making AI and smartphone chips in Arizona, but it also comes as some of their customers/collaborators, such as Apple, are also making commitments. Last month, Tim Cook spent time with Mr. Trump. And then we saw Apple commit to spend $50 billion over 4 years. Sorry, $500 billion over 4 years. Right. And so I think we'll see that overlap and continued, insert $100 billion plus commitment here from some of the biggest companies around AI chip making as the administration really pushes and focuses on those partnerships.
Yeah. So, TSMC made this announcement at the White House. I wonder, do you have a sense of if this is TSMC sort of bowing to political pressure, or is this something the company would have done anyway?
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it's in reaction, like I said, to some of the other announcements that have come up. I spoke to my colleague, Channer Liu, who covers chips very closely. And it's interesting, right? Like it is both efforts, both Apple and TSMC's efforts are boosting US local chip making for sure. One is the makers, one is the customers. It's very synergistic. For example, in TSMC's Arizona facility, Apple is the largest customer. And so when I think about bending the knee, I actually think of it a little broader, which is clearly companies are doing this. And if you're TSMC, you need to have an effort of your own to be part of it, or it makes sense for you to be synergistic with clients like NVIDIA and AMD.
Yeah. President Trump did talk up the announcement this week in his speech to Congress.
We don't have to give them money. We just want to protect our businesses and our people. And they will come because they won't have to pay tariffs if they build in America. So it's very amazing. You should get rid of the CHIP Act, and whatever's left over, Mr. Speaker, you should use it to reduce debt or any other reason you want to.
So the CHIPS Act is a law that Congress passed in 2022. It puts $52 billion towards subsidies to incentivize chip manufacturing in the U.S. The money is being awarded to many companies, including, it should be said, TSMC. Natasha, this seems like the president wants to rely on all sticks, no carrots when it comes to getting more chip production in the U.S. What do you make of all this?
Yeah, I mean, actually, as you asked that question, I think a lot about a story we spoke about on this show a few months ago, which was that Intel is one of the companies that was able to finalize its access to CHIPS funding around $8 billion in November, right as before the new administration was inaugurated. And so I think a lot of companies have been preparing for this moment. I mean, Trump very much was clear that the CHIPS Act was something that he was going to take a whack at. And I think the goal is super clear, which is they want the US to be able to compete with countries like Taiwan, South Korea when it comes to manufacturing semiconductors. We speak about the AI race all the time. And so to me, I think seeing companies jump into this moment doesn't feel like an immediate reaction. It feels like one that people were preparing for the moment that Trump started campaigning, and also it's like I said, it's been one of his points for a while, and so I don't think it caught anyone by surprise.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move to our last story. A Reddit co-founder is joining the bid to acquire TikTok. So entrepreneur and investor Alexis Ohanian, the co-founder of Reddit, has joined a consortium led by billionaire Frank McCourt in an effort to acquire the social media platform. This is known as the People's Bid for TikTok. My colleague, Megan McCarty-Carino, spoke with McCourt in December, and he made the case for why ByteDance should sell to this consortium.
Quite frankly, we're one of the only viable buyers. We meet all the criteria. We have the funding. We're not an antitrust threat. We are not looking for the algorithm that the Chinese government has made clear that under no circumstances is going to be sold or shared.
A law passed last year requires TikTok to cut ties with its owner, ByteDance, which is based in China. The social media platform has until early April to find new ownership in the U.S. So, Natasha, the People's Bid for TikTok, it says it plans to give users control over their data and prioritize privacy. What would TikTok look like if this group were to buy it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the impact of Alexis Ohanian joining as the strategic advisor on this bid should be, underestimated in any way, because Alexis, saw firsthand, was in the driver's seat of how consumers interact with the internet en masse, dealing with moderation issues, sort of
on Reddit.
On Reddit. And so, dealing with moderation issues and others while when he founded Reddit. And so I think he really saw firsthand how like a prolific community can transpire, and then also some of the challenges that can come alongside of it. So I think it's great news if you are part of this bid, that it, moves from, into people that really have a specialty in social media and clearly have some of like the respect and relationships there. In terms of how it looks, I mean, Project Liberty has said that it's not interested in purchasing the app's algorithm, its recommendation algorithm. That means that if it was to purchase it, it wouldn't have its existing level of intuitiveness and algorithms, and maybe it would have a separate one. But we also know that Alexis is really passionate, and the bid is really passionate about making it so people can own their own data. So there's a few differences, obviously, just on that front to pay attention to. And of course, like we'll see if it even happens.
Yeah. And, this bid, as you mentioned, is part of a larger initiative called Project Liberty that says it's working to build a better internet and wrestle user data back from big tech platforms. Do you have a sense of if most internet users actually know what they would do with their data if they controlled it? I do not know what I would do with mine.
Totally. I mean, I feel like my like personal life very much like explains where people are at, which is all across the range, right? I have people that are, have deleted TikTok 2 years ago and are, and want others to as well. And I have people that are praying and we're so grateful for a deadline extension. And, my group chat blew up when TikTok was first banned. And so I think that it's really split. I think that of course people care about some of their user data, but this has been a question actually for a while now, which is there's so much legislation and efforts toward this. Do people care or does the government care? And maybe the government is representing the people in this case, but I think any bid that will be successful in the US government's eyes will be responding to that concern because that's the heart of why it is, seen to be such a threat and seen to be the subject of a ban for so long. I mean, my big question for TikTok is, does it even want to sell? Like, is this just sort of us skipping past a few steps? Or does the app sort of just shut down and disappear in the US? In that case, I think US consumers will have, yes, of course, other ways down the road to manage their data, but definitely not have to answer that. Like TikTok definitely won't have to answer that question.
Mm-hmm. Natasha Mascarenhas, she's a reporter for The Information. Natasha, thank you so much for talking with me.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks to all of you for joining us for Marketplace Tech Bytes Week in Review. Daniel Shin produced this episode. I'm Stephanie Hughes. This is APM.